All right, obviously, two big things happened yesterday in terms of the post-mortem of this Mets season, the way it ended. And the first thing, which we're not going to spend too much time on here, was Steve Cohen spoke. He put out a tweet or an X or whatever you want to call it, basically apologizing to Met fans. And listen, it's just words at the end of the day. It doesn't really change anything. It doesn't help anything, but it does go to show you why we're really lucky to have Steve Cohen as the owner of the Mets. He's transparent. He speaks to us. It's been a while since he tweeted. He didn't really tweet during this whole, just complete collapse that the Mets did since June, but he did put out a statement after the game, and we're really lucky to have him because he's actually cares about the fan experience. He wants to win, and believe me, guys, this is a type A guy. He's one of the richest people in the United States, one of the richest people in the world. He doesn't want to own a loser. He does not want this attached to his name. He does not want a collapse attached to his name. This is embarrassing for him, and there's no chance that he's even remotely happy right now. I'm sure David Stearns is not loving his job right now. Steve Cohen is probably on top of him right now, and he's going to try to win, and this doesn't really come down to him. You saw what he did. He pumped money into the team. He upgraded the stadium. He's trying to make the fan experience better, and he's trying to get free agents. He's trying to make the team a winner. It didn't work, but we're still lucky to have Steve Cohen as the owner of this team. That's the first thing I wanted to say. That one doesn't really mean as much to me, but it is nice to see an owner who's being transparent and out there and communicating with fans, even if it's just through a tweet. The more important thing was David Stearns' press conference, and I'm going to go through some of the main points of it. I'm going to play some clips from it, but mostly I just want to kind of go over my thoughts on it, because I had to watch it a few times, because David Stearns speaks in kind of managerial speak, and you have to kind of read between the lines with him, and he's not going to give you very much information. He holds everything close to the chest. He's not willing to really put himself out there, which is a good thing. You don't have leaks out of the Mets. You don't hear any news that they don't release themselves. They basically keep everything in-house and quiet, which is good. It's bad for us because we want to know everything that's going on, but it's good in terms of a healthy organization. So really, the first thing that I thought was the major focus of one of the major focuses of this press conference was David Stearns taking complete responsibility for everything that happened.
David, this would be a fair question to ask a number of people, but as you're the one that's here speaking to us right now, what could you have personally done differently to prevent these issues that you just described from happening?
Yeah, I mean, I either make or delegate every decision that's made here. So you point to a decision that didn't work out, and I'm responsible for it. And so, we have all the resources we need. We have tremendous ownership support. We have tremendous fan support. And clearly we had segments of our team that were not good enough. And that's on me. Look, I think it all starts with personnel, and that's my responsibility. We had a roster construction that at periods of the season put us in a position where we were putting suboptimal defenders in certain places. And that's an area where we got to get better. Yeah, look, I think I take ownership over this roster. I've been here now for 2 years. That's plenty of time to shape a roster, to meld a roster. And so, yeah, I take ownership over the players that are here. As we continue to develop our players, that is naturally going to change the composition of our position player grouping. And yeah, I'd say holistically, we need to get better defensively.
He took ownership. He told you, listen, I'm the guy. I'm the one who makes all the decisions. I'm the decision maker here, and I'm the architect here, and everything that happens comes from me, or at least I delegate it to someone else. So if you're looking for anyone to blame, it's me. And I thought that was refreshing and nice. And what else is he really going to say, right? He's not going to blame the players. He's not going to blame Mendoza. He's not going to put the blame anywhere else. He took ownership of the problem. But that takes a lot to do, and say that, listen, I'm the problem. I didn't do enough to build a great roster. And things didn't work out quite the way I thought they were going to. And that's huge. When your executive does that, it's a good feeling. The next big thing that came out of this is something that we kind of already knew. We were 99% sure, but he confirmed that Carlos Mendoza will stay on as manager for the Mets.
And are you prepared to say that Carlos will definitely be the manager next year?
Yeah, Carlos is coming back next year.
One, why is Carlos Mendoza the right person going forward?
Yeah, I believe Carlos has all the same traits and assets that I believed in when we hired him 2 years ago. And I think over the course of his tenure here, he has demonstrated that. We had a tough year this year. There's no question. We are all disappointed. We are all frustrated. Mendy as much or more than anyone else. But I still believe he's a very good manager, and I think he's going to demonstrate that.
Now, obviously, this is something we all expected, without a doubt. And as I kind of think a little bit more about this, I was definitely on the fire Carlos Mendoza train. I don't think he was the right manager for this team last year. I think he made a ton of mistakes, especially with the bullpen. Some pinch hitting, some pinch running, some lineup decisions. I wasn't always a fan of Carlos Mendoza this year. But I really feel like what David Stearns is doing is he's giving himself almost a scapegoat. He's going to keep Mendoza on, but if the Mets struggle early next year, if they start off the first half of the season and they're really struggling like they did in the second half this year, he has a built-in excuse, and he can fire Mendoza halfway through the season. Now, is that his only reason for keeping Mendoza? No. He also probably in his own mind does realize that, hey, this is on me more than anyone else. I didn't build a competitive enough roster. And really, if anyone should go, I should be the one to go. So he's going to give Mendoza one more chance and put him out there and say, show us what you can do. I'm going to put together the best roster I can. I need you to manage it the best way you can. And if it doesn't work out, the next guy to go is Mendoza. And Stearns is going to keep his job, at least for another year. So he has kind of that built-in excuse now with Mendoza. And he also knows that if you really wanted to, throw all your chips on the table, it's Stearns who would be gone over Mendoza because he's the one who built this roster and it just was not good enough. I think what was also important here is Stearns kind of admitting to his own faults. He said a couple of different times he needs to be more proactive.
David, a few things. In your opening statement, you said we have to learn from this. What did you learn from this for moving forward?
Yeah, I think on a number of levels, there are areas where we can probably be a little bit more proactive, and I can be a little bit more proactive. I think some of these lessons we're still investigating and still fully understanding various aspects of our team. But there are clearly times in the season, times over the off season, where I can be a little bit more proactive.
Can you dig down on that? What does that mean to be proactive in what areas and what way?
I'm not going to get into specific transactions, specific forms of transactions, but there are areas where maybe we can get a little bit more aggressive.
And just maybe I'm using a different term, just the last thing is a sense of urgency about, like you said, some of those trades might have made your fans even sicker about it. It feels like to get the free agent you might want or get the trade you might want, there needs to be some irrationality. Do you work in one of those marketplaces where there needs to be some irrationality and maybe even more than you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I think urgency is the right word. I do think urgency is the right word. And I think we have demonstrated that at points. In the free agent market, we have demonstrated senses of urgency. Frankly, I think in the trade market at points we demonstrated a sense of urgency. Certainly at the trade deadline we did. We didn't acquire players that ultimately, or in certain cases, we didn't acquire players that performed well here. And so clearly that did not work. But I think urgency is a very fair word.
And what I read that as is the complaint that we all have about David Stearns is that he's so patient and he's so small market minded and he's willing to think about the future way above now. Like he's almost thinking of 2 or 3 years from now rather than trying to compete today. He's not willing to trade prospects for Garrett Crochet. There was a report basically saying that it would have been Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat, I believe, would be the package plus more to go out and get Crochet, but it would have been a package based around those two guys. If you look at that now, and you look at what Crochet has done in Boston, he's behind Tarek Skubal, probably the next in line for Cy Young Award. Would you make that deal, Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat for Garrett Crochet? Absolutely, you make that deal right now. But it was one that Stearns was not willing to make. Now, is that true? I believe it was John Heyman that put that out. I don't know. But that's what we're talking about when it's David Stearns, right? He holds on to those prospects. And then last year, when the heat was on a little bit during the trade deadline, he went out and traded some pretty decent prospects for some rentals. So I think this patience, I think during the trade deadline, that patience kind of started to wane a little bit, and I think you might see a little bit different of a David Stearns going forward. Now, we don't want him to become reckless and start trading all the prospects and leave the cupboards bare like Mets teams in the past have. But overall, I think he needs a little bit more maverick in him. He needs a little bit more, I'm going to make a deal that helps us right now. Will that end up happening? I don't know, but I think with Steve Cohen probably breathing down his neck now to build a winner, and him knowing, like, you don't have that many chances left. You can't have another season like this. This was your one chance. He's going to be more proactive, and he's going to, go down that road now of trying to win now and in the future, where it's not building an organization for the next 5-10 years. That's part of it. But the main thing is winning right now, and I think that's where he's going to be a little bit more proactive. He also kind of said that nothing is off the table. He was asked a couple times about pitching and would you have done things differently at the trade deadline? Would you have gone after starting pitching more at the trade deadline? And he basically said, well, at the trade deadline, I think Mets fans would have been upset with me with the prices that, basically these other teams were asking for their starting pitching, and that's why a deal didn't get made.
Would you be more interested in adding a definite number one type starter? Are you going to look at that a little more seriously?
So I'll repeat what I said, is we're not going to take anything off the table. I think long term for the Mets, the best thing we can do is develop our own frontline starters. I think we're on our way to do that. I think we're demonstrating that. And so our main emphasis is going to continue to be there. But we're certainly not going to take anything off the table this offseason.
And I agree with that. You're not going to give up top prospects. If they're asking for Nolan McLean for Sandy Alcantara, then no, the answer is no. And it seems like maybe that's the kind of deals that people were looking for starting pitching, because everyone was looking for starting pitching, and there wasn't very many teams that had it to give. So the prices on those guys seems like they were extremely high. And that's why it didn't happen. He was asked about his past and kind of going bargain bin shopping and looking for guys on good deals, on 1 or 2 year deals to try to, keep the staff afloat. And he said that nothing is off the table. He also did say that, he looks more towards building through the minor leagues and through the system and development rather than going out and getting free agents in the pitching staff. But he understands that nothing can be off the table after a season like this. So do I think they're going to go out there and get an ace? I don't know. I think if the Mets do go out and get a big-time starting pitcher, it's going to be a guy that you can go out and get who has some control. Whether that's a Freddie Peralta, I know he only has 1 more year left on his deal, but a guy like that where it's the Brewers, you have to give up something to get him, but you can then re-sign him to a long-term deal or let him play out the string. Maybe if it's just a rental kind of thing, you don't have to give up that much to get him. But a Freddie Peralta, if the Pirates ever decided that they want to trade Skeens, I think that the Mets would be the first phone call that gets made to them. I think the Mets would definitely jump on that. He's a young guy with years of control left. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's going to happen, but if the Pirates ever decided we're going to trade Skeens, I think the Mets would definitely be involved in that. Now, would David Stearns ever give up the capital needed to go out and get a guy like that? I don't know. I find it hard to believe he would, but I think it would be more of a possibility now than in years past. I think one of the big points in this press conference was that Stearns said he was open-minded on position player groups in terms of run prevention. Run prevention was a huge focus of this press conference.
Dave, aside from Pete Alonso's free agency, position-wise, you guys do have a lot of people coming back and the same core that you've had for a while. Do you anticipate making significant changes to that group? I know you talked about run prevention and some suboptimal positioning.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to be open-minded on our position player grouping so that we can improve our run prevention. Does that mean there are robust changes? I don't know. Does it mean people could be playing different positions? Maybe. Does it mean we ask people to play different roles? Maybe. A day after a season ends, I'm certainly not going to commit to what things look like in spring training or opening day, but I'll say it again. Our run prevention this year was not good enough, and that is both pitching and defense. They go hand in hand, and we need to improve them both.
You heard it a lot. Run prevention is basically pitching and defense. And when talking about the core players on this team, Lindor, Alonso, who's now a free agent, Soto, Nimmo, those are kind of the core players. And when you talk about their defense, right? Soto is average to below average in right field. He's got a good arm, but everything else is he's not fast. He doesn't have range. He catches what he gets to for the most part, but he's just not a very good fielder. He's just not. He's an average to below average right fielder. And Nimmo is a very average left fielder. I know the metrics say he's good, but if you watch every day, you understand Nimmo's not that great out in left field. Lindor obviously regressed a little bit at shortstop this year, but he's still a high-end shortstop, defensive shortstop. And Pete Alonso was not a great first baseman. He was fine. He was average, and towards the end of the season, he was kind of unusable at first base. But, he makes the plays that he gets to. He's not going to make spectacular plays. He's going to make some stupid decisions sometimes. He's going to lollipop a throw or throw one over the head of the catcher at home. He's just not a very good player. He's an adequate kind of first base, and sometimes below that. So when you're talking about changing around these position player core group of guys, that might mean letting Pete walk. Or something I was thinking about and even got mentioned in this press conference, do you go to Pete and say, hey, if you sign here, would you be willing to be a DH? Maybe we'll give you 5 years, but we want you to agree to be a permanent DH instead of playing first base. And then he talked about switching guys' positions. So maybe then you think, well, maybe Nimmo can play first base. He's a left-handed guy. He doesn't have an arm. You don't need a great arm at first base. And he's still athletic enough where he'll do well at first base. Maybe we try to teach Nimmo how to play first base. Or maybe we move Juan Soto to first base and get him out of the outfield so we can get more athleticism out there and get better defense out there. I think that's kind of what he's talking about in terms of position players. I think he's also talking about guys like Mark Vientos, who really doesn't have a position. And I don't see Mark Vientos sticking around based on the comments he made about positional versatility and defense and run prevention. Mark Vientos does not fit in that philosophy. We always thought Pete Alonso didn't fit in Stearns' philosophy because he values defense and base running and saving runs and stealing runs. Pete Alonso doesn't really do that for you. But he's still important to a team like this because he's your slugger. Because he can change a game with one swing of the bat. And I think Stearns now maybe sees the light on Alonso a little bit, that he is important to this team based on this press conference because of some other kind of comments he made. One of them being the same thing he said for a couple years now about Pete Alonso. He had a good season. They would love to have him back. But he also said that when he looks at bringing back a player, or when a player goes into free agency, you don't just look at what they give you on the field. You look at what they are for the community and to the fans, and all of that has to come into the decision of whether you bring that guy back or not, or how much you're going to pay that guy.
Since the fan base's frustration, how much will that be a factor in two potential free agents being fan favorites in Pete and Edwin to maybe overlook budgetary constraints, but to reassure the fan base that you guys are still on the same page?
Whenever we're talking about departing free agents or players who were with us who are then free agents, it's always the holistic package of what that player brings to an organization. It's what he means to the team on the field, what that player means to the community, what that player means to the fan base. That is always part of the decision-making process, and I imagine it will be again this offseason.
So being important to the fans and being important to the city, and he's a charitable guy, and he's important to the fan base, and he's still a slugger. No matter what you want to say about him, he's slow. He doesn't play good defense. He's still a slugger. He drove in almost 130 runs this year. So I think Stearns is probably warming up to the idea of having Pete Alonso back, but I think it's maybe, hey, you're going to be spending 75% of your time at DH. And we're going to maybe train Nimmo or Soto to play first base. Or maybe Vientos to play first base. But I think Vientos has kind of gone off this team. He doesn't have that positional versatility that anyone else really does. He wouldn't really give an answer on Edwin Diaz.
Most of the industry probably expects Edwin Diaz to opt out of his contract. Assuming that happens, just what is your appetite to bring or to allocate significant dollars to a reliever like that?
I think rather than speculating on what Edwin might do, I think we'll let him make that decision, and then I can comment.
Basically saying, listen, Edwin, we don't know if he's going to opt out yet. We're going to let him make that decision, and then I'll comment on it at that point. But right now, he hasn't opted out, so he wasn't going to comment on that situation whatsoever. He was asked about the leadership of the Mets, or if leadership was an issue for the Mets this year, and he flat out said no. He said there was no leadership issues on this team. Everyone was focused and working hard and doing what they needed to do every single day. And there was no clubhouse issues, no leadership issues. And when pressed on it, what he said was it wasn't about the leadership. It was about maybe changing the roster around to fit better, to make all the pieces fit better together rather than a leadership issue.
David, just do you believe lack of leadership was an issue this season, either within the clubhouse or on the coaching staff?
I don't. I think we have leaders in our clubhouse. I think we had leadership in our clubhouse. I do not think that was a problem.
You think then they should have been able to maximize the potential on the roster if there was leadership there?
I come at this of like we need to create a better roster that fits together better. I think our players worked their tails off. I think they came to the park with the right attitude every single day, and it didn't work. And so I need to take a long, hard look at our roster.
It's just maybe the roster isn't cohesive right now. And I think that has a lot to do with the core, with Nimmo, with Alonso, with Soto, with Lindor. These guys are kind of piecemealed together. And then you add the secondary pieces and Vientos and Beatty and Acuna and Mauricio, 4 guys fighting over 2 spots. They might not fit very well together right now. So I think we're going to see a big roster turnover this offseason. I think you're going to see some of those young kids gone. I think you're going to see probably Pete Alonso, if he stays at least half the time at DH. I think they're trying to fit things around, and maybe the pieces that we have are good pieces, but they just don't fit well together. And that's what it seems like Stearns was saying a lot, that the pieces are there, but they're not the correct pieces. You're trying to put a puzzle together and the pieces don't fit. And that's what it seemed like Stearns was saying. Also, he was kind of scathing on Senga. Not scathing, I wouldn't say, but basically saying that Senga's put together 2 subpar seasons in a row now where he's been injured, and they would be foolish to think that he's going to give them 30 starts.
Jorge? With Kodai, he's obviously had a couple injuries, tough injuries, but he's also had a couple mechanical issues where he couldn't come back and just wasn't himself. Can you rely on him to be that frontline starter next season, and how do you evaluate what he does?
Yeah, look, Kodai's had 2 very inconsistent, challenging years in a row. We know it's in there. We know there's potential. We're going to do everything we can to help get it out of him. But no, can we put him in ink as making 30 starts next year? I think that would be foolish.
That to me says we have no faith in this guy. We don't think he's going to be part of this team. We don't trust that he will. We're not counting on him. I think he's probably pitched his last game for the Mets, whether they trade him or maybe just DFA him. I mean, he makes $15 million a year, and I think after next season he has an option. So Do they eat the money and just let him go? Do they try to trade him? I don't know. I think they're just kind of sick of the Senga experience so far. This is a guy that's very fragile. You have to work on his schedule. He doesn't, if one little thing goes wrong in his bullpen, it throws him off. And I just don't think they're very excited about the Senga experience anymore. He has all the talent, and as David Stearns said, when he's right, we know the talent is there, and we need to get that out of him, and we'll do everything we can to get that out of him, but it would be foolish to expect basically that to happen. So I don't think they're big fans of Kodai Senga right now. One last thing, they asked about hiring a GM, and he said they're not really searching for that. If one comes up, then maybe they would, if the perfect candidate came up, they would hire them, but they're not doing a search for one at the moment. So those were the big things in this press conference. I think we found out a lot. I think you see a little bit into kind of the psyche or what Stearns is thinking right now, which is he has some good pieces. They don't quite fit. He's maybe going to go after some top-of-the-line starting pitching, but I think with him it's always going to be if he can get a good deal. He's not going to overpay, and with starting pitching you have to overpay. I mean, look at the Yankees with Max Fried. It worked out this year. They got a great season out of Max Fried, but they signed him to 8 years. So maybe 4 or 5 of those years are going to be really good, and then the last 3 or 4 of those years are going to be bad. Just like the Mets with Juan Soto. Would you have rather have just signed him for 10 years? Absolutely. But you had to give him those extra 5 years to get him to sign. So the first 10 years of that contract are probably going to be great. After that, it's going to be a struggle paying Juan Soto all that money. When you go into free agency, you have to overpay. And I don't think he's willing to do that with top-of-the-line pitchers. I think he's going to go with these young guys and hope for the best and maybe sign a couple of innings eaters. Maybe he goes all out and makes a trade for an Alcantara or Joe Ryan or something like that. I just don't see him really signing a free agent starting pitcher. And there's not great options out there free agency-wise this year. I think Brandon Woodruff, Zach Gallen are kind of the top guys, but I think Gallen might take a qualifying offer after a bad season. Dylan Cease, Michael King, do either of those guys really excite you? They're gonna throw innings and maybe get a lot of strikeouts and have some really good games, but they have some bad games too. They're not ace type of guys. So I don't know if there's a great option out there except for maybe via a trade. But overall, I think this press conference probably shows we're going in the right direction. Oh, I also didn't mention, even though he said Mendoza is safe, you could tell the coaching staff is gone. And there's some comments that he made about the coaching staff, basically saying they're going to have a thorough process. They're going to really dig in on these guys and try to figure out. With Mendoza, he said, yeah, he's coming back. He's not going anywhere. And then when they mentioned the coaches, it was, well, we're going to have a process of going through this and figuring out what happened, why they didn't make adjustments throughout the game. That he mentioned how the offense would look great for the first couple of innings, and then all of a sudden for 3 or 4 innings they were a non-active offense, which shows that they weren't really making adjustments and weren't adjusting throughout the game.
David, how about the coaching staff? Do you think there'll be changes there?
We're going to go through an evaluation of our entire coaching staff. We'll do that over the course of coming days to a week, and then we'll make our decisions there.
On the right.
Hi, David. You spoke about postseason evaluations, but how much more intense and how much more of a fine-tooth comb will that be when it comes to the hitting, the pitching coaches, when you guys weren't able to make that October baseball run that you were hoping?
Yeah, we're going to certainly sit down and look at everything, including our coaching staff. It's normal after any season to do a coaching staff evaluation. When you come off of a disappointing season like this, it's certainly going to be a little bit more intense.
Just with regards to the offense, why do you think they failed to make in-game adjustments, especially towards the end of games?
I think there were definitely periods where we would score runs and then maybe have 3-4 innings where we weren't particularly active offensively. I think there were times where pitchers got a little bit sharper, times where we probably could have made an in-game adjustment to an approach and didn't. And I think that's going to be part of what we talk about, what we assess, and try to improve there.
And that falls on the coaches. Are they going to stay? I don't know. I don't think so. From what Stearns said, it seems like most of those coaches, especially Chavez and Barnes, are probably gone. Hefner, I'm on the fence about. I could see every one of them going at this point. So we'll see what happens on the coaching staff. But we know that Mendoza's safe, and I expect some changes in the coaching staff. Obviously, there's a long offseason ahead. This is all words at this point. We don't know what's actually going to happen, and David Stearns was careful to say that during this press conference. He said, "Listen, I'm not going to be locked into anything today. I don't know what's going to happen once we get to spring training or opening day. I'm not going to comment on what the roster is going to look like at that point because, for one, he doesn't know, and for two, he probably has 3 or 4 or 5 different plans, and they don't know which one of them is going to kind of work out. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully, these words do turn into maybe some roster turnover, some coaching turnover, just something. We need to inject a little life into this team, into this organization going into next season, obviously off of a disappointing one here. But I think we're in the right hands. With Steve Cohen and Stearns, I know people hate David Stearns now. I'm not trusting his process anymore. I'm not going to say just trust Stearns. He knows what he's talking about. No, those days of me saying that are over because of this season. He has to build that trust back with the fans. But I still think he's the right guy for the job, and I think eventually it will get done. And I think this will be the low point of the Stearns kind of regime here. Hopefully that's the case. But anyway, it's really all I got. If you like this type of content, please subscribe, give me a like, comment what you think about his press conference, what you thought about what he had to say, and what you think the Mets are going to do this offseason. And yeah, that's really all I got. So until next time, let's go Mets.